along with Norquest to bring to you this mental health event. Today, our team is made up of some brilliant and hardworking speakers that I have the pleasure of introducing. First, we have Bunkola Ojolade, who is an RSW and mental health therapy and new partner of Nurse on Wheels Incorporation. Next, we have Arlene Ambrose, who is an RN and health and stress management coach of Arlene Ambrose Curated Health. We have Nabil Premji, who is a W right here at Norquest for Growth and Harmony Student Health and Wellness. My name is Tiffany Thompson, and I am one of the many alumni here at Norquest and the owner of Nurse on Wheels Incorporation. Now, as a reminder, as a student here at Norquest, you can access these resources through the Growth and Harmony Center. If you are not a Norquest student, or if you have any family and friends who you know would benefit from these services, we have Bunkola at Reach Therapy and Nurse on Wheels Incorporation, and Arlene at Ambrose Curated Health. We're sorry. Now, not all of us know the signs and symptoms of depression and anxiety, but there are a few: excessive worrying, feeling restless, or an on-edge muscle tension, feelings of worthlessness, excessive guilt, fatigue, anger, and irritability. These are only a few signs and symptoms. Just please note that this is for educational purposes, and this presentation is not taken as medical advice. Please see a physician or your therapist for further assessment. Please note that some of the controversial topics may cause emotional discomfort. If you feel the need to step out, please feel free to do so. And seek help at the Center of Growth and Harmony or alert one of the staff members. We will have lots of time for questions and answers after the presentation, so if needed, please write down your questions and we will answer afterwards. Also, if you are here online, you can type your question in and our Josie will give them after the presentation. If we do run out of time on camera, you can come to one of our speakers afterwards. We are now going to turn our attention to Bunkola, who will start off with what is trauma, childhood trauma, effects of trauma, how we can detect it, and she will also briefly touch upon the cultural aspect of it.
Yes, thank you. So when we look at, we're looking at one of the common definitions of trauma. It is an event or series of events that involve fear or threat. Okay, so I'm going to be talking about 5 types of trauma, among others. All right, so the first type of trauma we'll be talking about are single incident trauma. So when we look at single incident trauma, we're looking at single experiences or enduring repeated or multiple experiences that completely overwhelm a person's ability to cope or integrate their thoughts and their emotions involved in that experience. Okay, so traumatizing events can impact a person's sense of safety, sense of self, identity, even impact a person's ability to regulate their emotions and navigate different relationships. Long after the traumatic event occurs, people with trauma can feel shame, helplessness, powerlessness, and intense fear. It's important to note here that the trauma events are subjective to the individual experiencing it. So events may be more traumatic for one person than another. So we have to, it's important to recognize that. When thoughts and memories of the traumatic event don't go away or they get worse over time, this may lead to what is called post-traumatic stress disorder, which can also make it difficult for a person to have the ability to regulate their emotion. So the next type of trauma that we're going to look into here is developmental trauma. Traumatic events that occur early in life, such as abuse, neglect, disruptive attachment, and What I mean by disruptive attachment, I'm referring to when a child is moved from their primary home and into another. Um, this is what we know as adverse childhood experiences, or what we call ACEs. Okay, so studies have shown that 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 experiences that are more commonly occur in the home, in the primary home of the child. Okay, and it also shows that these types of experiences are not acknowledged, right? And so as we know, developmentally speaking, that the age and the stage of the onset of trauma, a child's brain, memory, narrative, verbal capacity is affected. Okay, and so it impacts the child's ability to recover. So the more ACEs a child experiences, the more likely they are to suffer from things like heart diseases, poor academic achievement, substances, among other manifestations of trauma later in life. Okay, so the next point that I want to highlight here is on intergenerational and historical trauma. So for from our families, as we know, we inherit genes. We have foundational skills, okay? We have traditions, knowledges, belief systems, connections, wisdom, our identity, our resilience, and so forth from our families, right? So sometimes we also inherit behavior patterns, coping strategies from our parents or grandparents who may not have processed. Children learn by the adults around them. But when these adults are acting from their trauma, children pick up on these patterns. They pick up on these behaviors, right? And that become more normalized, okay? And so as we have talked about earlier, that children being the first survivors of trauma, might suffer from anxiety and depression as adults without being able to pinpoint its origins, right? And so making it difficult to detect and even recognizable and even minimized, right? And so intergenerational and historical trauma often happen in overarching societal context. And the context that I'm referring to facilitates the trauma from being passed down, okay? And so, for instance, poverty, for instance, patriarchy, for instance, war, slavery, colonization, genocide, residential schools, just to name a few contexts that I'm referring to. And so, when we look at signs and symptoms and even often reactions, we're talking about clinicians here are assessing for, avoidance of the trauma reminders. And so that is avoiding places, spaces, and environments, or even people that remind them of the trauma, right? Avoiding conflicts, flashbacks to the traumatic event. Some people might be experiencing exaggerated startle responses, right? Distressing dreams or having sleep problems, irritability, anger, moodiness, hypervigilance, impulsive behaviors you might notice, perfectionist behaviors, or perfectionist ideas, and even working too much, what we call workaholic, right? Being over analytical, overthinking, people pleasing, lack of boundaries, so the inability to say no and putting self first, disassociation, and again, all of this is about distancing from the problem, distancing from what you don't want to deal with is the trauma, right? So this might look like spacing out, zoning out, even isolation, right? And so it's important to note here that intergenerational and historical trauma specifically, those reactions, as we've mentioned, can manifest in poverty, can also be manifested in being trapped in cycles of abuse, cycles of violence, might even look like self-sabotaging, or even having difficulty maintaining and sustaining relationship and so forth. So all of these challenges, they all disrupt a person's optimal level of functioning. And one thing I want to share here is that re-traumatizing, which is the exposure of being in those places, those spaces, or those individuals that trigger the trauma through thoughts, feelings, memories that can, cause unpleasant emotions such as fear, anger, sadness, and so forth. And so there's so many, to look at when it comes to trauma. So it's always important to, talk to your healthcare professional, talk to your therapist if you have, and reach out if you're experiencing any of this.
All right, thank you, Bonkola. I do have a couple questions for you.
Yeah.
How can I create boundaries around helping others while being mindful of my own triggers?
Yeah, I think even wonderful question. I think it's important to recognize what you're at, okay? Recognize your capacity, recognize your level of what might be triggering you when you're going in to help, and be vulnerable, and just share that I may not be in a state of mind to support, but offer those resources. 211 has great resources. Connect with the I guess Norquest has their wellness center where you can connect and offer them those support. And again, when we talk about the people pleasing and not being able to say no, everybody wants to help. However, it's important to first recognize your own capacity and your own level of your state of mind when you are supporting.
Thank you. So to follow up that, what if I am not ready to disclose and that I am going through trauma because I am afraid of what that outcome will be?
Yeah, and fear is the symptoms that we've shared, and it's important to again take care of yourself first. As when you're getting on a plane, they always say, put the oxygen mask on yourself before you put it on your child, right? So it's the same analogy here, and it's important to I'm not sure, right? So I'm not sure how to best support, but I've heard about this type of resource.
So it's kind of like, if we can't help ourselves, we can't help others.
No, unfortunately, you'll just be the blind leading the blind type situation. Yes.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Now Arlene will elaborate a little more on how stress and trauma are related and how it leads to anxiety and what coping tools we can use to manage those.
Yes, definitely. Thank you, Tiffany. So we get into the state of trauma, right? And we feel unsafe. We don't feel safe, and that causes some stress, right? So stress is in our bodies, right? We're hypervigilant. We can't get in that state of relaxation because we're wondering, what's going to happen to me? Is someone coming? Our mind is constantly going, right? So then what happens is because of this, we feel like, okay, how am I going to cope? And when we talk about trauma and stress, people who have been through trauma and that heightened state of stress, that sometimes becomes their norm, right? And so they're used to functioning on this high level of go, go, go. So then when you say to somebody, hey, like, can you just relax? Have you ever said, can you just relax? Like, and people are like, what? Like, what are you talking about? So that state of getting into relaxation can actually be stressful and anxiety provoking for some people. It's not because, hey, I don't want to relax, but it's that they might not necessarily know how to because they've been in that state for so long. So that's something to keep in mind. And like Bonkola was saying, from that, you didn't feel safe. You didn't feel like you could depend on anybody, depending on what the traumatic, situation was, and it might be continuing to happen. So then another thing that happens is that you feel like I have to protect myself. So that's where this overworking and, over functioning sometimes happens, where you're like, okay, I've got to get the house, car, land, like a fortress, and then, all this money, and then I'll be good. I will feel safe. And from that, if you were not seen, heard, validated from that traumatic experience, another thing that could happen is that you feel that you have to work to achieve something to have that self-worth. So you feel like you always have to do something, right? When I reach this, then I'll be worthy, and then I will feel safe. So that's how that intertwines. So the point I want to make now, talking about stress, is I always get the question, like, how do I stop stress? How do I don't want to stress anymore. And the main point I want to say that stress is not bad. Stress is not bad. We are built for stress. I want to give a different perspective. If something good happens to you, you write an exam and you get your grade and you pass, there is some level of stress to that. Your heart is beating and you feel a little bit anxious. That is stress, but it's because you're responding to something good that's happened. If we didn't have stress, what stress is basically your body saying, like, hey, that needs your attention. That needs your attention. That needs your attention. That needs your attention. And you get to choose what needs your attention. But it's very important that your body and mind points out what needs your attention. Okay, so that's the first thing. What happens is when we get into unmanaged and uncontrolled stress, that's when we run into different types of problems. So we have stress, that's normal. It's how we respond to it. That's where things come up. And then so we have this pathway where we have stress and we're thinking, what if? What if I don't pass? What if this happens? What if this happens? And then that leads into the pathway of anxiety, where you overthinking, your mind can't turn off. And then there's different barriers, of anxiety. We can get into panic and OCD and those types of things. Mm-hmm. And then another pathway that we can go on is stress, which is normal.
Yeah.
And then I keep repeating it. And then unmanaged, uncontrolled stress, and you're going, and then that leads to exhaustion. Mm-hmm. And now you're apathetic. You're like, I don't want to see my friends. I don't want to get out of bed. And that pathway can go down to now depression, feeling, self-harm, suicidal ideation. Mm-hmm. So what I want to say, the good thing is that this can be interrupted at any time. So it can be interrupted and it can be reversed. So what makes the difference is your coping strategies and how you interpret the stress. So the stress hormones get released based on how you interpret what's going on around you. Okay, so that's a very important point. And the question that I get is, okay, but how do I respond to an initial stressor? Like something happens right now, like I can't remember anything that you said. Like, how do I respond to it right now? So this is what I would say. First is I would lengthen the response between the stressor and the reaction, right? So you can respond and be like, I'm going to freak out. And this takes practice, right? This is something that you practice over time. So one, lengthen that response. So something happens. So maybe let's use, exam is coming up and an exam date got changed. So you're going to take that deep breath with a long exhale. Okay, so that's a way to lengthen the response. Maybe you will actually get up and, go to a different position. If you're responding to a person, you'll say, I feel really angry right now. but I'm going to give it 5 minutes. Can I give it 5 minutes before I, have a response, or whatever the length is? So you practice over time lengthening that response, the deep breathing. And as you're doing that deep breathing, it's really intuitive. You ask yourself, what do I need right now? So you have the stressor, close my eyes, and I mentally say, what do I need right now? And you can feel in, scan your body. You're like, oh, my neck is sore. I'm gonna drop my shoulders, relax my shoulders. I feel it in my back. Oh, I feel like I'm getting a headache. You can feel different things, and intuitively, you will get that response. So maybe I need to get up, or I just need to rest, or I just need a minute. Like, you can say that, like, I just need a minute. So that's the second thing. And then after that, in terms of interpretation of the stress, I like to say, especially when it comes to stress and anxiety, like, I am safe. I have the ability to keep myself safe. I'm not going to faint. I'm not going to pass out.
Mm-hmm.
I could deal with this. I don't have the answers right away, but I don't need to have the answers right away. I am capable. This is exciting. Stress is exciting. I get to solve a problem. This is a challenge. Like, this is my problem solving skill. Like, wow, can you imagine? Like, look at all the stress I have. Like, I must be really good at dealing with this, right? So you like hype yourself up, right? And that changes your perspective, and your body's like, oh, okay, it's not that bad. And then the last thing is getting into the tactical things. So that's the initial response. The tactical things is, if we're talking about an exam, okay, actually making a plan. Do I need to set boundaries around this? Do I need to make a schedule? Do I need to make a study plan? So that's when we get into the different things. So the tactical things, and also making sure you take care of yourself through self-care, massage, get out in nature, reduce, maybe toxic people who just change your mood, becoming aware of those things, and doing things like Bunkola and Tiffany were saying, put that oxygen mask on first and do things that promote your well-being.
Mm-hmm. I felt like you were talking directly to me. A lot of y'all are gonna feel like that, but that is okay. Thank you, Arlene.
Yeah.
So I do have a question, and this actually, I want to really know the answer to this
Okay.
as well. So how can I get my brain to shut off from worry and anxiety over stress so I can sleep at night?
Okay, so that is a great question. Okay, so at night, right? So something that you can do is, if your brain is constantly going, I like to have a notebook beside my bed, and I write down everything, because a lot of the times you might be like, I need to do this tomorrow. I need to study for this exam. What if it doesn't work out? It's going, right? Dump all of that stuff. Everything that you could possibly think of, you're going to write it on there. And I like to look at it and say, okay, what is this doing to me? What does any of this mean? And when you look through the list, a lot of it is possibility versus probability. And the difference is, something that's possible, it could happen, but it's like in the future, you don't really know. And probable is something that possibly could happen. Like, if you didn't study for an exam, it's probable that you won't pass, right? That is something that is, tangible. But if you've studied, if you've prepped, and you're still worried, that is a possible thing, right? It's different. So I write all that down, and I know that that might not be enough. So then I dedicate what I call a worry window. So I schedule time to stress and worry. And so for example, I'll say, okay, like, can I not maybe think about this until 10 o'clock in the morning. And I think about it and I said, like, yeah, I could do that. So I said, at 10 o'clock, I'm going to get up, and that's my worry window. And I could, stress all I want about all these things and problem solve. So the thing with that is that you actually have to do it, because you have to be honest with yourself, right? So when you make that plan and then you get up and you're like, okay, start worrying about it, after some time, you train your brain and your mind to know that, okay, I have a dedicated time, and I'm going to make a strategy, and I'm going to, let me get into, I'm not going to get into this because I know there's time, but we have different strategies of how we actually tactically deal with the stressors. So those are just a couple of things. And then I'll say one more thing, screen time too, it really affects the sleep.
Yeah.
So I know for me, I tried leaving my phone outside, but how many of you still have your alarm clock on your phone? Yeah, so that's the thing I couldn't get over. Like, I tried the old school alarm clock, but I'm like, it's not the same. So here's what you can do. Get a second phone. Like, I'm not talking an expensive new phone, like a used, cheap, inexpensive phone. And you're gonna take that phone into your bedroom, and there's nothing on that phone. There's no Instagram, there's no messaging, there's nothing on there. It's just your alarm clock. And I put Spotify, so sometimes I like to listen to music, and that's it. So that's your alarm clock. You can put on some Spotify, put on some like brown noise, which is like ocean and thunderstorms, which is very relaxing. Set your alarm, and you go to sleep.
Yeah.
Thank you. That is some good information. So how can I manage stress when I have responsibilities that just don't go away?
Okay, yeah, that's a great question. So, like I said before, I just want to highlight that stress is normal. So just getting that new perspective and building up your tolerance for uncertainty. Building up your tolerance for uncertainty looks like saying, okay, so I made this plan, but I don't know how things are going to turn out, and I'm okay with that. So saying that and saying, like, I can deal with it, whether it's through getting support, whether it's through self-care, and then practicing that. So stress is not going to go away, but it's not the stressor that is the thing that's damaging. It is your reaction and your response. So building up how you respond to it. And that is a practice thing. So you have your responsibilities, and you're like, you take your deep breath and you're like, okay, I could handle this. And then you get into the tactical things and the self-care things. So thank you for that question.
Thank you, Arlene. That was very insightful. Last but not least, we have Nabil, and Nabil will be speaking on a topic that is not talked enough, and that is male mental health.
Thank you, Tiffany. Yeah, mental health is something which is not spoken out open, and Uncola and Arlene did highlight few things which are causes of stress, depression, and other mental illnesses. So they weren't talking about just female human beings. They were talking about human beings, and that applies to men as well, right? So make sure you take a note that mental illness not only happens to women, but it happens to men as well. Because at the end of the day, we are human beings, right? And it's a topic which needs to be addressed because based on Canadian Mental Health Association, they say 3 out of 5 people who die out of suicide are men. And that's 75%. And that's a very big percentage. And that's something which needs to be addressed because each and everybody's life is important. It's valuable. You are here for a purpose, right? It's like everybody has their own life, they had their own history, just like Bunkola suggested, that people go through trauma, through life experiences. They do learn from their elders because that's how we learn. We mentor our elders, and then eventually, when we grow up and are able to make our own decisions, then we decide between right and wrong. Before that age, it's more like, okay, whatever mom and dad did, or whatever my uncle, aunt did, or whatever my grandparents did, or my older siblings did, or my people in the community did, is the right thing to do because they didn't get punished for it. But it's also important to acknowledge that they too left alive when they were children. So they have gone through their experiences, and whatever they teach, whatever they express is what they know to be the right thing to do until it's corrected, right? So it's important to acknowledge that as men, and to acknowledge that we are human beings, and it's important to express, right? So that's one thing to keep in mind. And I do understand as men, we do have to address the stigma around mental health. And it is also important to understand what stigma is. Stigma is something, a belief which is made of misconception and lack of knowledge. Like some people just decided, oh, this is wrong. It was a group of people, and then it starts spreading, right? And that prevents men of speaking of their to their loved ones, or taking care of their own mental health, or seeking support. So that's one barrier, and one of the types of stigmas is social stigma, right? That's a negative attitude towards people experiencing mental illness, right? That's a big thing which goes around in, like, be it Western culture or Eastern culture or immigrant population or whatever maybe. It's having for example, with depression, most people see it as a sign of weakness, right? But it is important to understand that the reason why a person got into depression is because of the experience they had in the past, right? We do learn coping mechanisms. We do learn of managing, like we learn ways of managing the way we cope with things, but they don't always work. So we have learned that habit. We are born newborn babies. We have zero experience, zero knowledge, and whatever environment we are exposed to is where we learn from, right? So it's important to acknowledge. And then as a result of the social stigma comes self-stigma, right? Because we start believing in whatever is shared through social media. Social media is the big thing nowadays, and there is toxic social media, and then there's good social media. So news, there's so many, like, we are exposed to so many negative social media that we start believing that it's true. We don't ask ourselves as to, is it true? Is it factual? No, we just believe, and that leads to us judging ourselves and feeling shameful to disclose our challenges, right? So and then in addition to that, it also comes in with cultural stigma, which Bunkola addressed in her talk, right? It's the beliefs, the values, the norms which we are brought up with. We end up growing up and normalizing it, right? And that sometimes they were right in the earlier ages, but that may not be relevant in the current day and time, right? Just like social media and computers weren't around 20 plus years ago, right? So we can't really continue those beliefs and norms and practices and be okay with it, because before, when social media wasn't around, maybe mental health concerns weren't as high of a concern, but now they are everywhere, right? And the other thing which is very common in our society is the masculine norms, right? So Western culture, right? Like lots of parents may tell their kids, or lots of friends may tell their colleague, oh, you need to man up, or men don't cry, right? And that's something maybe taken wrongly, with maybe a friend's way of kind of encouraging you to be strong, but those are words which also kind of affect the person who tries to minimize what they are feeling, what they are going through as, no, that's crying is a weakness, or me experiencing this is a weakness, or it's a feminine thing, which lots of people in the society associate crying with as a feminine trait, which is like they are human, we are human, and expressing your emotions is way of is part of the wellness circle, right? Taking care of your emotional self, right? And as a result, when men don't talk about their mental health, they end up using substances and alcohol to take care of, to self-medicate, and that's, yeah, it may help temporarily, but it's not a long-term solution, because substance abuse and alcohol won't only affect your financials, but it also impacts your family life and other life. So it is important to note that as men, like, yeah, we do come through hard times, but it's important to acknowledge that there is good ways of addressing it. There is bad ways of addressing it as well, right? And with men of color, there is other challenges as well, like racism, the biases, poverty, incarceration, and those are valid concerns which stop men from accessing services. But it is important to acknowledge that those were made by the society, made by us. So we have to focus on ourselves, just like Bunkol and Arlene have talked about, that we have to take care of ourselves, and if it requires asking for help, then that's okay. As guys, we are into cars, right? Most of us, so, or all of us. But at the end, we are able to fix small stuff like a flat tire, change our oils, but at home, right? But when it comes to engine issues, we may try to fix it, we may not, but we are okay with taking it to a mechanic because they are trained to deal with those, right? And we won't take that risk of kind of opening the engine and be like, oh, we'll figure it out, because that will be, if we don't figure it out, then there's financial implications to that. So let's treat our mental health, our brain, as the engine of the car, right? When help needed, like, yeah, there are some ways we are shown to take care of our mental health, and those are, if they work, it's good, we continue those. But sometimes we get to a point where we can't come out of that vicious cycle, right? So it's important then to talk to our loved ones, to our friends who we trust. And sometimes it's hard. I understand it's hard to talk to family members because we are seen as maybe the breadwinners or whatever, but we can also talk to professionals. As professionals, we are, as a social worker and psychologist, we go to school and we are trained on how to, on acknowledging that, like, yeah, these things happen and that's how they affect a person's mental health. Just like Bola highlighted, trauma is something, right? And then trauma can lead to stress and other challenges. So we know, and then most of us have assisted quite a few people who may have gone through similar concerns you may have maybe going through. So we may be able to assist you in getting those supports out there, right? And in all our services here, we are big on confidentiality. So you can trust us that we won't share anything without your permission, right? So at the end, I would just like to say, as men, it's okay to express emotions. It's okay to seek support. It's okay to take care of yourself and get the help you need, right? The reason I'm kind of enforcing those and maybe repeating myself in some ways is I do have gone through depression. I've had for depression. I do have ADHD, but without me having, if I hadn't disclosed, I wouldn't be sitting here today. Because I was in that part of life where I was contemplating suicide, but it's because of the support it's because of me speaking out. I was able to release that pressure from me and I was given that space to do my own thing and figure out what I do want to do in life. And helping others has always been my passion, but social work came to me after 10 years. And I always tell others that if I was a social worker before the 10 years, I wouldn't be as good of a social worker as I am now, because I do understand people go through different challenges. They may not be similar as me. They may be bigger than me, but everybody has different windows of tolerance. So do seek support, do talk to your loved ones. And if talking to in person is a challenge, there's lots of online resources. There's a distress line where you can talk to an unknown person about your challenges, and they'll help you progress it. And I hope our message was beneficial to you, and thank you for it.
Thank you, Nabil. I actually have a question for you. So how did you feel and how did things change for you after you sought support?
So before I go to that point of seeking support, I was a person who would bottle up a lot. Like people would make fun of me, people bully me. I just took it and took it. And when I was able to just speak it out, it was just like a weight lifted off my shoulders, right? Like, yeah, my problems were still there, but sharing it helped me feel better, right? And when I seek support, yeah, I got some medical support where I needed some medication, right? And through seeking support, for example, a good example is like when I was in school after I had seek support, I did get accommodations through like accessibility services, which is at Northwest College here. And prior to that, like ADHD was part of my life. Now that I think of it, I always back home, growing up in Tanzania, I always fell short of finishing my exam, but I didn't understand why. I just felt like, oh, I was just not as smart or not as smart as my friends, or I was not able to do. I didn't deserve to be first. I was just an average student. But when I spoke about it, and after I did see that, like I did get some extra time in exams, some quiet environment. And even though sometimes I didn't need that extra time, it gave me that space to kind of calm down and perform well. And that did show up in my results. For example, in one of my academics in post-secondary, getting those supports helped me to get up to a 4.0 GPA while I was at 2.7 or 2.8. So seeking support can make a big difference. We are not here as professionals, we don't solve problems, but we are there to guide you. You are the expert. We are just there to listen to you and to share options and to be there for you when you need.
What are some healthy emotional outlets for men?
There is plenty. Arlene shared quite a few, but as men, we are big on sports, right? So joining a sports team, if you have a sports you enjoy, joining a sports team, going to the gym, socializing with your friend, making time for that. So whatever you enjoy, your hobbies and stuff, make time for them in your daily schedule. And that will help you to kind of not be in that stress mode all day. It's like not going from home, from work. Yeah, you have your work stress, and then you go home, then you have your home stress. It's important to have some self-care time, some time to yourself, just like Arlene kind of pointed out, to manage your mental health, and when need be, seek support. Right? There's no harm in seeking support. Right? You'll learn a lot through the expertise of the professionals, or by talking to others. They may be able to kind of point out the solution you personally kind of pointed out in your own talking, but you didn't listen to yourself. Right? So
Thank you so much, Nabil. This is a
Okay.
topic that we all really need. Now we have some time for some questions and answers. I do have some anonymous questions for the panel. I have a list here. How can I handle my stress and anxiety better during exams?
Yeah, I guess I'll answer that. So I think the first thing is acknowledging that you're feeling this way. You know, a lot of times I get questions like, how do I stop feeling this? How do I stop feeling this? But it's acknowledging like, yeah, I am stressed. Writing exam is stressful. I feel anxious, and that's okay. That is normal. It's like normal to feel this way with, before an exam. I accept and allow this anxious feeling, and then just going into, that self-talk, and, I've prepped, their options, if not worrying about the what ifs, like, if you've already prepped, you've already done the work, then that self-talk, the self-care as well. And then one tool that I use that really works for any stress or anxiety that comes up is we each have a thought that comes into our mind, which is unique to each of us. So maybe your thought is like, if I don't pass this, then, I'm a failure and I can't do X, Y, Z. So you're going to write you're going to write the thought that keeps coming to your head most down. And again, ask yourself, what happens if this doesn't change? Like, what is this doing to me? Like, it's getting me so torn up. I feel so, the things that you feel, and you're going to counter it. So another thought and like an active strategy. So you could say something like, I could handle the outcome no matter what. I could handle the outcome no matter what. And when that thought comes, you pair it with something visual. So I like to have like a stop hand. Like, so throughout the day, when the thought comes, I kind of picture myself like, like, okay, I could handle this no matter what. I could handle this no matter what. And over time, you will notice that it becomes less and less, and know that you can handle it.
Thank you. What should I do if I think my friend is struggling, and how can I help them?
So one thing that we've all talked about here, it's about recognizing what is it that they're struggling with. Okay. Identifying what that is for them. As when we are under the stress, our brain just kind of goes blank. So oftentimes it's helpful to identify that for them. Okay. And to normalize that. Yeah, I also have gone through that. Relate with them and just kind of sit with them and ask them, what is it that you need? How can I support? Because we don't want to assume that, that my support is needed, right? We want to, give them that, self autonomy to be able to say, okay, I think I need this, and then kind of problem solve with them, because you are their external brain, right? And oftentimes I find that when somebody's sitting with me and I'm not able to, I'm like zoned out trying to go through what's going on in my brain, it's as if my body is not in that present moment, right? So that's kind of like a trauma response that we have to recognize. So it's about recognizing what's going on for them, reflecting what you see, naming what's going on for them, and then sitting beside them and asking them, okay, how can we solve this together? What would you like done? Okay, that's putting the power back in their hand and giving them that strength. Okay.
Thank you. This is like a follow-up question, but a personal one. When do I know I should ask for help?
That's a tough one. I know for me, I am one of those that, will want to solve my own problems, and I don't recognize until like I am intensely feeling disabled to ask for help. So one thing I like to always do is to notice, what am I doing to myself? Okay, notice that thought, as Arlene has beautifully highlighted. Notice, what is this thought that is causing my body to be uncomfortable? Notice the tension that is in your body that is being created by these thoughts, even by the trigger. Okay, so it's about naming it for yourself. Okay, it's about, okay, I'm not in my right frame of mind. Who can I call? Having those trust people that are your person, that you can talk to, that you feel no judgment for, and having them speed dial. It's like I called my mom, I called my partner. Sometimes just looking at a picture. So it's about, what are you noticing by what is, what you're struggling with.
Thank you for
Right.
that. So I do have two more questions to follow up for that first question about exams. We're just going to tie those into the same answer. So I'm going to read both of them. How do I stop school anxiety from affecting the rest of my life and activities? And how can I manage school or work and life stress?
Okay, so great questions. And so to follow up, what I'm going to do is kind of reiterate that the questions are, how do I stop this? And again, I want to say that it is normal to feel those like that way, right? It is stressful. It is anxiety provoking. Before coming here, sitting here, I was like, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, right? Like I'm stressed and anxious, but really what I am is excited. So it's that reframe is I am excited about this. How can I use this as fuel? So even though I still feel this way, okay, I feel this way, I'm nervous, but I'm going to go ahead and, take the little steps and identifying, what I mentioned before. What do I need right now? Like, what do I need? I walked around a bit, I took off my shoes. So you identify that. And then we get into the tactical things. So that is building up that tolerance for uncertainty. So you've prepped for your exam. There's the tactical things that you can do, which is like, okay, so I have my boundaries. You can say to your friends, like, hey, this week is my exam period. I know that I get stressed. I need to book a massage. I need to, go on the wall, put my legs up. That really is very restorative for your nervous system. Go against the wall, put your legs straight up, take a couple of deep breaths, and you'll feel so relaxed. So you have to identify what works for you, spending time with your kids, whatever it is to help you de-stress. And then you go into your exam knowing I've done the prep. I can't control the outcome, but no matter what happens, I can deal with it. And you can apply that to various scenarios.
Thank you.
If I may add to it too, like those are great tips to the day before the exam, but something which helped me, and I always tell the students who come see me, is time management, right? Time management, creating your schedules ahead of time can help you manage lots of stress. And that skill will not only help you in your school life, but in your personal life as well. So one of the things I did when the term started was as soon as I got that course outline, I went to my monthly calendar. There's different kinds. Find what works for you. If you go to a stationery, there's different books. There's a big calendar you can put on a wall and mark all the important dates, right? And then I had my weekly schedule. So in my weekly, I preferred schedules where it started from like 7 or whenever I woke up to the time I go to bed. So 7 to 10, 7 a.m. to 10. And in that I had like highlighted, okay, I have classes on those days, and then I would try to fill in the gaps, right? So if I had 2 classes and maybe an hour of break in between, I wrote lunchtime because taking break is important. And all I did at that time was take lunchtime, right? And it's also important to recognize when are you the most alert, right? Are you a morning person? Are you an afternoon person? Or are you an evening person? And then based on that, you can schedule your tasks accordingly. Like if you're a morning person, then do the hard things in the morning. If you're an evening person, then do it then. And then if you're not a evening person, then you schedule something which, yeah, you have to do. but then it doesn't take too much brain power. So like doing your laundry, maybe cooking or running errands or whatever maybe, right? You schedule it that way, and then make sure you also schedule your time according to your priorities. What's the most important thing? Like, yeah, school is important. Then I have this appointment coming up, and my family commitment, my partner's commitment, my kids' commitment, and then the rest can take. And self-care is important too. Don't put self-care as the last thing to do. It is important because you fill up your glass, and that's how you can help the others, right? And time management will also help you work backwards. So if I had an exam tomorrow, I wouldn't study anything new today, right? It would be more of a review and relaxing time. So I'm ready, making sure I go to bed early, I get enough sleep. So I'm more focused. And then the day before, if it's 10 chapters, then I break it down in two or in one chapter a day. And if, I have an appointment on Monday, I can't study, right? Then you can go, okay, I'll study on Friday or on Sunday. Then you go backwards. That gives you time to kind of break out that big preparation goal you have for your exam into small chunks, right? And if you study chapter by chapter and maybe you get stuck in a chapter, right, then that you can go ask your teacher about it or your friends about it, right? And adapting that lifestyle, you can even schedule time with family. Okay, today I'm gonna go spend time with mom or a friend. So you know that if I've accomplished those tasks during the week, then I've done what I could, right? And checking those tasks off when you do it gives you that good feeling, just like when you get a tick mark in your exam, right? So that can help reduce our anxiety, and it's a habit which will help you be more present on what you're doing. If you're spending time with your kids, your family, you'll be more present, knowing that whatever I had to address, it's already taken care of, instead of being with your family and thinking about your exam, right? And when you're studying, then you'll be like, okay, I need to study this. The rest can be taken care of later, right? So you'll be able to get more done, and you'll see that you have more free time as well to kind of do whatever you wish to do in addition to what commitments you have, right?
Thank you so much. Where can I go for help as a student? Actually, I'll let Nabila answer that.
So as a student online, I know we have an online audience. If you're at Norquest, do come at the Center of Growth and Harmony. We are in the new Singram building, room 1-101. Our team is made of counselors who are psychologists, social workers like me, and we also have LPN nurses. And if you are from another post institution like McHugh and U of Alberta, they may not be named as Center of Growth and Harmony, but they may be called with different name. But there is services in every university and college or even high school or junior high, where they're there to support the students with their personal well-being and academic needs. And all we ask is you just come see us, and if we are not the right people to assist, we'll direct you to the right people. But do seek support or ask your teacher if you're not sure where it is, or service desk, student service desk, they would be able to guide you to where to go. So, but do come see us. It's free for all students in any post-secondary. You don't have to pay extra. And for international students, usually they do worry that, it might impact their student visa application or work permit application. No, the services in school, our services are seen as student service, just like library service through student association. So it won't impact. It's free. So do take advantage of it, because it will make just your life a little bit more easier and manageable.
Great. Thank you, Nabil. So I have 3 questions here that tie in as well. And so I'm just going to read them all. How do I make sure my kids are doing okay? How can I help them if I see them struggling? And what age do I start talking to my kids about it?
I think, as a parent, you want to shield your kids from problems and challenges. And I think we have to recognize that that is a mentality that came from our older generation, right? This generation, mental health is very well publicized. Schools talk about it. Even my 6-year-old is I think when she was about they have cartoons about it, right? Right? Cartoons about helplessness. So I think as the starting point is to recognize that you are modeling for your child what mental health is. Okay, so that's the first thing. It's just to acknowledge that. So how I show emotions, my children will also, you know, take that on. So always, first and foremost, is be mindful of what your emotions look like. It's okay to show them good emotions. It's okay to show them bad emotions because that's how you're teaching them this well-roundedness of being human. Okay, we don't want to create a sense where emotions are not okay. Expressing yourself is not okay. That's how you can coach them around, okay, this is, what this is. That's what we call teachable moments, right? I know for in my home, um, you know, like for example, my daughter would be like, "Oh, mommy, you look, are you frustrated right now?" Because I use that language. Do you need a deep breathe? Let's yell together because that's our coping strategy. Ah, right? So that already I'm modeling with my kid, you know, how you can get out your frustration instead of hiding that frustration, going to the room to hide that emotion as if it's not okay, right? So already I'm already teaching them 3 things. Emotions are okay, naming them, and modeling what coping strategy we can do together. Right? I don't recall the other question, but yeah.
What age do I start talking to my kids about mental health? How do I make sure my kids are doing okay? And how can I help them if I see them struggling, which I think you've already talked
Yeah.
about that.
There's no age. It all depends on what you're comfortable with. Okay.
Yeah.
Every parent does things differently. Every individual sees when things are appropriate or getting out of hand, right? So you're reflecting what you're seeing, and you're also modeling for them how they can, manage their own emotions.
Thank you.
And if I may add yeah, it's also important as parents, we are models. So we have to acknowledge that again, when some concerns come up, we may not be able to address even as adults. So it's okay to seek support. So modeling that, okay, telling your child, oh, this is something we are dealing with, or it may be a struggle with the children, which you're not sure. So modeling, you can tell them, I'm not sure how to uh, assist you, but let's go and see a professional about it, right? So normalizing seeking help, right? So that to make it a normal behavior for your kids that once they have tried each and everything to address their issue, and if they're not able to address it as friends or as partners in the future, then it's important to seek professional help and not just try to figure out things we're not sure about. So yeah, just like we model behaviors, like we should model seeking support as well, right? And that will help the children in the future.
Thank you. So when newcomer families come to Canada, is it important to screen for trauma and PTSD right away? As you mentioned, children with ACES will suffer greatly later in life. Is it more appropriate for the families to seek help, or do we screen at intake? It's a very good question.
Yeah, it's a loaded question.
Yes.
Too. So first of all, I'll break that down. Is it important to please help me out with that?
No, it's okay. Is it important to screen for trauma and PTSD? Right.
Well, oftentimes we don't want to assume. Okay, so it's important to talk to the individual and get their permission and to explain. Okay, so when individuals come into the country, we can't assume that this is something that they would be comfortable with, right? And another thing, we have to explain what these terminologies are. Okay, we can't assume that languages that we use here are languages that is used everywhere else. So we have to explain what these terminologies are, and assist them in making that decision or that call for themselves, and providing the option, like, these are based on, the education that you provide. It's important to support them to navigate the system here, when newcomers come. And there's lots of support services and settlement workers that are equipped and knowledgeable in that area, that you can get that support. 211 is a wonderful resource here in Edmonton.
Thank you. As you mentioned, children with ACEs will suffer greatly later in life. Is it more appropriate for the families to seek help, or do we screen and refer at intake?
I think, just like what I've highlighted,
Yeah.
before, that once you're noticing these signs and symptoms, it's important to seek out for that support and get the specialized clinician who specialize in those areas to support. I always say that it's important to notice and acknowledge that the behavior is the symptom of an overarching problem, like trauma. Okay. And that treat the symptom, but we want to heal the body. And the way we want to do, we want to make sure we regulate first, and get the clinician who is trained in that specialized area to assess and to provide other options.
Thank you. So we've already pretty much touched up on this, but newcomer families are busy setting in and may not make their family's mental health a priority, may even struggle with the taboo of mental health assistance. So I can see what they're saying, that it can be quite overwhelming at times to even focus on mental health as an immigrant family here in Canada. Great. So what signs or symptoms are visible when mental issues elevate to mental illness? What signs and symptoms are visible when mental issues elevate to mental illness? And I think I actually did touch up on some of the signs and symptoms at the beginning. I can mention a few that I had said at the beginning here. So they're excessive worrying, feeling restless or on edge, muscle tension, feelings of worthlessness, excessive guilt, fatigue, anger, and irritability. Do you want to touch on that already?
And I think that, so especially when you're talking about stress, right? On a whole, this is good news. We are pretty good at handling our stressors. And I talked about that pathway, right? And so you have the stress, and then it gets into unmanaged and uncontrolled. So that's when you're not taking that time out for yourself. So if you're constantly going, or it could be your environment, not you, but something going on in your environment, that your mind and your body is just like, I can't handle this. And then you feel that breakdown. So, the irritability, can't sleep. You feel like you're just not yourself. You're on edge. You can't think properly. You're starting to become forgetful. Maybe a little bit of paranoia. That's when, at any time you can seek help. You don't have to wait until it gets there. Like, therapy and all that stuff is just not only for when there's a situation that's unmanageable. It can be for preventative and maintenance and all of those things. So going down that pathway, when you reach that, distress, if you haven't sought for that help before, then you definitely know when just normal everyday functioning feels off. Then definitely, like, Bankula highlighted, you can talk to somebody, you can start with a friend. If you're not, like we talked about, especially for families, you're not feeling comfortable, and then definitely go and get that support. But it starts with a conversation, just like, hey, I'm not even feeling well today. Like, what do you think?
And as men, yeah, with the stigma comes like a hesitation in sharing those feelings and emotions. So it's also important to, just like Arlene highlighted, to pay attention to behaviors, like the change in behavior, the angry, the aggressiveness. Like sometimes we notice that, oh, we used to enjoy hanging out with friends, but now we are spending time alone. Right? We used to enjoy playing sports, but we are not doing that anymore. Or maybe we used to be social drinkers, but now we are leaning on it all the time. Right? So those are some flags which like family members, friends can notice, but we ourselves can notice that like, yeah, maybe because of that stigma, we're not recognizing our feelings, but we can recognize that we need support when we are engaging like toxic behaviors, like, oh, we are drinking more than we should, and that's impacting our family, or we are being like we are bringing our irritation and anger out in our kids and family, which nobody likes. That we are doing that, so that maybe okay, why am I doing it? What's bothering me, right? So those are ways you can always kind of recognize as men or as human beings that like yeah, those physical behaviors, changing patterns of your normal behaviors, right?
And I also want to add too that, there is power in relationships. And so with our relationship, we can, like Arlene mentioned, recognize, those change in behavior in our friends, in our kids, and we can call it out for what we see it and not try to sugarcoat it, because the way we call it out in our relationship, we are, naming it for them. Okay. And as I've mentioned before, that sometimes people are not able to identify it or recognize it within themselves. So as we name it for others, we can talk about it, have a conversation, see if that's something that they would be open to do. Inviting that dialogue, inviting that space, creating that space of that normalcy, right? It's okay to to call each other out with the relationship that we have.
Thank you. These are all really good questions. As men, how does being spiritually grounded affect one's mental?
Spirituality is different to everybody. I understand some people are religious, some are not, but through spirituality, we develop our beliefs, our values on how we want to function, what's right, what's wrong. So it's important to take a note of those and use those in your daily uh, practices, right? On how you lead yourself, how you show up, how you attend to things. But we also have to reflect on, are these supportive values, right? Or are they not, they need to be changed, right? So changing your beliefs and values, like reflecting on them is important. And spirituality is also believing in God. I'm a Muslim by religion, and uh, going for prayers and spirituality is a major part of my life. And that's how I lead myself in my daily living. And that gives me, it's my self-care too. So whenever I don't attend mosque regularly, if I miss a day, it feels like I missed a week. But when I'm in that environment, it just gives me that peace of mind, like I disconnect from the world and time for myself. Like yeah, my thoughts do run during uh, prayers, but just being in that environment, I know it's a spiritual environment. I don't have to worry about what's going on the outside. It has helped me, but spirituality to everybody is different. But it's what shapes who you are and how you behave in your daily life. I hope that answers the question.
Yes, thank you. How would one cope with pressures to live up to the societal standards of the modern?
But Yeah, that's a good question. So societal standards of modern men. That's a very big term. Yeah, we have expectations set by society, but we have to prioritize ourselves. What's important to us? What do we want to be? Right? Like yeah, there's just like there's so many professions. Like there nowadays, there's like YouTubers, there's uh, people want to go into engineering or uh, go into nursing and all that, but it's important to acknowledge, yeah, societal pressures will always be there. Negativity will always be there. No matter what good you do, people, like, they say negativity sells. That's why you see memes. That's why you see everything highlighted is negative. Like yeah, there's a lot of good things happening around the world, but what's shown is the negative, right? So, or what's highlighted in like social media and YouTubers, the good stuff, but they don't show the struggles of it, right? So it seems easier, but at the end, it's you have to kind of forget what others think. It's what you think, what's important to you, because it's your life. You were born, you will die, and you get one life, right? So you know yourself better than anybody. So do what you love. Do uh, what you think is right, and listen to yourself. Like yeah, there is you have the society, you have your family, your community. Therefore, advice. Remember that those advices are coming from their point of view. They shouldn't define. They're not defining you because they can't. Because nobody besides you has lived the life you have, or experienced certain things you have, or likes that loves doing some things which some people may not. Right. So do what you love, and the right people who are meant to be in your life will come to you, right? So that's the way to kind of help deal with that societal pressure on like, oh, I have to have this house. Like, yes, you can see like the like my the Facebook owners and those guys. They live a simple life. They are billionaires. They can own mansions. They can own cars, but they choose their life. They choose to spend their money where it brings value. Some people enjoy traveling, right? Some people enjoy family time. So do you? Don't worry about the rest, right? At the end, it's your life, right?
You do you. That's what I'm gonna take home with me.
And the rest will take care of yourself, right? I always tell people there is the sun, there is the moon. They shine at different times. So you will shine at your time, right? And just like popcorn, we put it in the same bin, but they pop at different times. So your time will come. Yeah. You just do you and do the best you can to do what you do.
Love that. All right, we have one more question, and it's actually just a touch up on the school balance. So how do you cope with the all or nothing of learning to balance life, school, self-care? I find myself struggling to even make dinner if I have reading assignments. I spend the entire weekend studying and getting in a side of burnout.
Great question. So I want to touch on this. I know we always hear work-life balance or work-school balance, and I'm like, no. If you are dedicating time to something, you're going to have periods of imbalance. And I just want to say that that's normal. You're not going to, if we have a pie, your life is not like divided into 4 perfect squares. Yeah. If you have little kids and you've just given birth, that's going to take your focus. If you're in school, it is going to take up more of your focus. So instead of balance, I want you to probably think of what are my top 3 priorities right now. So if it's school, family, and taking care of myself, then the other things, they're going to fall a little bit lower on that scale, and they're not going to be you have to change the priority. So it might be a conversation with your friends, family. Hey guys, I'm in school and it's taking a lot of my time and energy, so I might not be able to be as present and for the next whatever, while. So I just want you to know. And also getting that support if you can. So if you listed your top 3 priorities, asking like, Nabil was saying, that support, hey, whether it's a family member or maybe we need to get, a sitter or finances, whatever it is that you need. So instead of balance, maybe say like alignment, like, is this in alignment with, my values and my priorities and what's important to me? And then there's also like different resources. I know culturally it's like you come home and it's like you don't cook the food or whatever. That can be like, it's easy for me to say like, oh, you can get food delivery or something. But I know culturally that sometimes that's not possible. You still have that expectation of coming home and doing certain things. So it's really looking at what else can shift so you can make that time and have the self-care.
Thank you.
It's all about time management. Just like I highlighted, I keep on saying that, and I'm sure even the students I see, they might have seen it. This guy is just like a cheerleader for time management. But at the end, that's what it comes to, time management, right?
Yeah.
When you break things down into smaller things and put a daily task, a weekly task, and respect that schedule and do that. Like, okay, now I have to get lunch. That's all you do. Now I have to go spend time with my child. Do that. And then if you have to prepare lunch, schedule it. Right? When you put it in there, it takes all that worry and tension from your head to a paper, just like journaling before bed helps take out your thought on paper, and then you can approach it at 10 a.m. just like this Arlene's time, I think at 10 a.m. That's when she starts working.
My worry window.
Worry window. So that's where you can worry about it. And sometimes what you listed may not be of concern. You'll be like, oh, why was I worried? But it may be just a contribution of you not taking care of yourself. Yeah, maybe you're burnt out, and that's sign to give yourself a break. So when you manage your time, you'll be able to squeeze in the fun stuff, the relaxing stuff, the cooking and daily errands, and get a lot done instead of just having everything on your head.
And this is something I also have to take in mind, is don't overload yourself. If something is putting you overboard, just remove it.
Yeah.
Remove it, visit it later on or a couple of days after if it's not super, super important. All right. It's definitely something I need to take.
We all do.
And it's okay to say no,
Yes.
right? It's okay to adopt that mentality where if I'm not able to give you that 100% when I'm with you, it's like I'd rather not do it.
Yeah.
And do it at a time when I can schedule. So it's okay to say no. It's not a bad thing. It's just, you're prioritizing your needs, but you're also respecting the time and attention you'd be giving somebody else or in assisting somebody else. And we all want to help everybody, right? So we want to do it with good intention and not out of anger or frustration. I have to do this for this person. But when you respect your own time and do it at the right time, you feel more fulfilled than resentful.
Thank you so much. Now, as a reminder, as a student here at Norquest, you can access the resources through Center of Growth and Harmony. Nabil is one of the RSWs there. If you are not a Norquest student, or if you have family and friends who would benefit from these services, we have Buncola at Reach Therapy and Nurse on Wheels Incorporation, and Arlene at Arlene Ambrose Curated Health. We are coming to a close of our end time, but I would like to thank those who listened through the live and those who came in person to the studio here at Norquest. I would like to thank our lovely speakers for joining us today and bringing forward such an amazing and moving presentation. I would like to thank Norquest especially for sponsoring this event as well. And thank you to Josie. And thank you. And remember, whatever you are going through, you are not alone. You do not have to feel isolated, and there is support you can find on your campus or within your community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.